Oh wow, my computer is doing something. Oh wow, I don't have HTOP installed. Great guys. Extra HTOP. Yes. Cool. So what is going on here? Chromium. Boy, Chromium is going wild. And OBS. Okay, well, OBS is expected. I guess, yeah, we are fine now again. I don't know what happened there. Classical computer thingies. And also my mouse movement seems kind of weird. Wait, if I make it one slower, that's too slow. If I make it one faster, that's too fast. Awesome. Cool. So, welcome back to this advertisement episode. Yes, we are starting. That's looking good. We can close that. And let's go. So, Lasergurkenland, reachable under lgl.sillyhoon.com, which is a vanilla anarchy server. And every time I say vanilla anarchy server, I really have to concentrate to not say German Minecraft server, because I used to say that a lot when I was younger. I don't know why I made German exclusive servers. Yeah, hate me for that. Whatever. What is going on? Frame rate's looking okay. I don't feel it. Something feels off currently. I don't know. I'm just tripping as always. Cool. So, Lasergurkenland, come and join, play with me. So, anarchy server, that means that you're allowed to kill other players, and there are no plugins, so it's a pure vanilla server. So you can also grieve, and there's no world guard and stuff like that will protect areas. Is there even still world guard? Is it still a thing? I mean, when I was young, world guard was the shit to use. Maybe it still is. I don't know. Well, but you probably know what I mean and stuff. So yeah, so if that is interesting for you, come play on Lasergurkenland. It's sadly an empty server, so there are also very famous anarchy servers like Constantium or whatever, and 2b2t. But the problem with those is that they are like almost too famous, and they have a lot of players, and these players tend to lag the server or even fill the server, and then you have to wait in a queue so that you can start playing. But like before you start playing, you have to wait long times, and that can get really annoying. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I started this server, where I can just plug and play. I can just turn on Minecraft and play vanilla like in the old days. Also, like, usually the other anarchy servers, they are not really vanilla. They are vanilla-like. They aim to be somewhat vanilla-ish, but they actually are not, which is kind of sad. I mean, it also makes sense, because if you modify the server, you can still persist or like keep core vanilla gameplay, but add some fixes to allow for some more stable anarchy environments. But since we don't have players, we are not required here to do something like this, which means you can use all the exploits and loops and glitches and whatever that work in vanilla. There's no speedgot fixes for that, which can be interesting, because I think, for example, the llama dupe is fixed in speedgot since forever, and I really enjoy it, enjoy using it. Especially in this anarchy environment. Usually when I play Minecraft, or when I used to play in single player with friends in vanilla, I just build giant thingies that refill my items and stuff like that. If I would do that here, I would get grieved. So the only way for me to stay near spawn and be rich is duping, which is kind of riskless and can't be grieved. For example, my gold and my slime farm got grieved, and all my item stashes, and So I think that's a really nice feature that you can dupe. You might disagree on that with me, but yeah, I don't know. So anything else that I need to say to advertise the server? Yeah, sure. The uptime and word resets. So typical for anarchy servers is that you don't reset the word, and this is also the plan for here. And if you have no permissions and no moderation, players tend to do crazy stuff and push the limits, and that's also what happened here already. Somebody reached the word border, which means that the word size is already I should look it up at some point so I don't keep saying wrong numbers, but it was around 200 last time I looked, and 200 gigabytes. So it's big already, and it's still working fine, everything, and I have way more storage, so that should be fine, and I will not be required to do a word reset to free my disk space or stuff like that. So that is a big plus for a small server. I mean, usually if you have bigger anarchy servers, they have like donations and they make money and they can reinvest in the server, and they have strong CPUs, and they won't take the server down because there's some like request for it. People enjoy playing there, and maybe it even is like a good income for the server hoster and stuff like that. But this is not the case here, and usually on small servers then the server tends to go away if the administrator loses interest in the server. And I try to circumvent that, and that's probably the wrong word, but I try to avoid that by paying the server in advance for multiple years. So even if I lose interest, the server will still be up, and I chose a hosting model where I have a lot of disk space. I chose the best CPU the hoster gave me, the hoster offered me, and I forgot how much RAM it was. Like, I think it's 16 gigabytes of RAM, something like that. So it's not too bad of a server, but yeah, still it's Minecraft and written in Java, and yeah, you can really push the server to its limits still, even with a small amount of players. I for some reason have 160 slots activated. I don't know, the server could probably not handle 160 power users cheating around, but yeah, let's see how that goes. Since it's always empty, the slot limit doesn't really matter. Yeah, cool. So yeah, that's that. So if you're interested in playing on a server where you're where the things you build are not reset by administrators, then come join Lasergurkenland. Oh yeah, and to mention this persistence of your own buildings. Well, I mean, if you build near spawn, you will be griefed very likely. So that's not very persistent. But one second. But if you go away from spawn a bit, there's a good chance that your buildings will persist for multiple years. And even if I can't keep it up anymore, I will publish the world file so that anyone who wants to keep playing here or revisit the world or stuff like that can continue this thing. Yeah, so that's that. But that won't happen in the near future, and also if the server in a few years still has active players, I won't take it down. So yeah, I can afford a few bucks, especially in a few years. I expect higher income. I can afford a few extra bucks on a server where players have interest in. Yes, but yeah, now we are talking like long time future. Like, that's really hard to make predictions about these times. Maybe the planet already like collapsed. You never know. So that was a long intro. Today we have a shorter talk, so it's not 1 hour. Maybe that's why I did a long intro, to get something done in this exercise, in this episode. Yeah, so today's talk is from the mediacc.de channel. Surprise, surprise. And it has the title 36 C3 Wi-Fi broadcast, and I'm kind of excited for that. Let's see what it's about. And yeah, so if you're interested in that talk that I'm now going to play back in the background, make sure to check out the original, which is in the description. And yeah, just make sure to check out Lasergurkenland, lgl.silicon.com, join now and play with me. Other than that, yeah, the video is uploaded in 2019, has 2,000 views, and yeah, just watch the original, don't watch me like replaying it here. What bitch do we have here? Is this... oh my gosh, are these potions? Yeah, whatever. Okay, let's play back the video. So, let's go. This fucking bitch.
So he's building maps with the help of cameras, but he also likes to, well, repurpose things that he finds useful for other things, and that is also what he will be talking about.
That's called hacking, isn't it?
In this talk here, it's about Wi-Fi broadcast. So he will show you how to convert standard Wi-Fi dongles into digital broadcast transmitters. Give him a warm applause for his talk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Today I would like to present to you my work on...
Oh boy, that's always what our teacher said is a no-go in a presentation if you start with "today I'm going to present" and then your topic name. Yikes it in.
modifying Wi-Fi dongles to serve purposes that they are not intended for by the Wi-Fi standard. And one example would be digital broadcast transmitters, but I will also mention some other examples that you could use them for in the way I intended. So coming to the contents, I will start with motivation, because the obvious question is, why would we even need to change something with Wi-Fi devices? Because we're using them all day, they're working quite well. This is true for the intended applications, but there are a class of applications in which the Wi-Fi standard, well, fails pretty much, and this is what we will be addressing in this talk. Then, after the motivation example, I will show you the basic principle. And building on top of that, I will introduce some improvements that I introduced to make such a broadcast transmission really bulletproof. And finally, I will give you some usage examples to show that it's really easy to use, and also give you some real video footage that has been transmitted using this broadcasting scheme. So, coming to the motivation. So, my personal motivation, and a rather good example of an application for this technique, is if you would want to build a free open source first-person view drone. So this can be any type of drone. I just depicted here a quadcopter, could be a land-based drone, doesn't matter. The important part is that this drone has a camera attached to it, and it live streams the video down to the operator of the drone, and the operator flies this drone only by looking at this live stream. So there's no direct line of sight to the drone, so reliability is really important here in this application. And I imagine all of you have an idea how you would realize such a system, and actually on first glance it's pretty straightforward. Like you would just add some Wi-Fi hardware to the drone, you would create an access point with this Wi-Fi hardware, and then on the ground you have the laptop and you connect to that access point. Really simple. And then from the drone you would send down the data, video data, simply by UDP packets. And this looks fairly decent, right? It should work. And if you test it at home, and then you will probably notice that it works really well. And then you go outside, start flying, having the time of your life, and suddenly, oops, you lost association. And this means, of course, you as an operator, you're instantly blindfolded. And good luck trying to rescue your drone in that situation. Well, you might think, maybe it's not so bad. Wi-Fi usually automatically reconnects, and this is true. This might help you, might not help you. So, yeah, good thing about this is you can directly go shopping parts for a second drone, because your first drone will have already crashed by now. So, in summary, association or stateful connection is something you do not really want in this application. And that's a problem of standard Wi-Fi, because standard Wi-Fi usually uses associations. That's another problem I'm coming to right now. So I wrote here that we are using UDP packages, and this seems to be like a smart choice, because it's unidirectional, so you just send data from the drone to the ground station and avoid all the hiccups of, let's say, stream-oriented protocols like TCP. So data could queue up, you need to send acknowledgement up to the drone, which is of course not really something you would want to do. So UDP seems to be a good choice, but in fact it's not, because under the hood, like on the network layer, seems to be fine, but on a MAC layer of Wi-Fi, there will still be data flowing from the ground to the drone in the form of acknowledgements. So Wi-Fi uses acknowledgements, and so you actually need to acknowledge the package from the drone. And so you have a required upstream from the ground to the drone, and this is obviously something you would not want to have, because then you rely on two links to be working perfectly to just to get the data from the drone down to the operator. And that's another disadvantage of this bidirectionality, which is actually the term of the problem. That is that you ideally want to have asymmetrical setups. So what would you do to increase the range of the setup? You would, for example, install a power amplifier on the drone side, so that the data gets spread further. But with standard Wi-Fi, you would need to have the same power transmitter also on the ground station, which is again pretty pointless. And so bidirectionality is a problem with standard Wi-Fi. There are a couple of other things. So Wi-Fi has some automatic control mechanisms, like for example, transmission rate control. So if the two devices are, well, at a certain distance, the receive signal strength of course drops at the receiver, and this triggers a mechanism that throttles or dials down the transmission data rate on the transmission side. And this happens automatically. This is not under your control. And so imagine you're trying to send a 10 megabits per second video signal, and suddenly the card decides to just switch to 5 megabits per second. Result will be data will queue up on the drone, latency will increase, you'll crash. Same problem. There's also automatic power control, which makes sense in standard Wi-Fi, because you want to limit the interference between close by networks. So you just send with the let's say, minimum required amount of energy. But since you rely so much here in this application on this link fully working at any time, you do not really want to have that. You want to use always maximum power in that case. And lastly, you have no signal degradation in standard Wi-Fi. So standard Wi-Fi uses CRC checksums, and it just either delivers you packets that have matching checksum or no packets at all. And this is a problem because let's just assume you fly further and further away from the ground station, and at a certain point the video feed will just stop because CRC checksums will turn bad. And this is actually almost a crash guarantee again, because you have no warning up front. It's just like, and it's off. And actually what you want is, you want to see the transmission errors. This gives you a good hint that it's maybe time to turn around, and then you still have enough visual feedback to actually control the drone to move around. So signal degradation, again, not possible in standard Wi-Fi. And yeah, this is kind of the motivation for me to kind of flip things upside down a bit. And now we are coming to the basic principle. It's actually quite simple. So, you know, in standard Wi-Fi you have the device classes a station, like an access point where you connect to, and the device that connects to this access point. And in Wi-Fi broadcast, the modes in which the devices work have been renamed by me, so they are simply a transmitter and a receiver. And the hardware used for that is just plain standard Wi-Fi dongles, €8 per piece, so it's pretty cheap. And from this, let's say, mode name, you can already infer that it's a truly unidirectional data flow from transmitter to receiver. And these devices work in injection mode, in the transmitter case. So basically, you can send with that mode arbitrarily shaped packages into the app without any association. And the receiver runs in monitor mode, meaning it will pick up every packets that are floating, all the packets that are floating around in the app. And with an appropriate filter on the receiver side, you just get the packets from your transmitter. And this already establishes a very primitive but surprisingly good working link that does not share all the problems of standard Wi-Fi that I mentioned in the previous slide. In theory, this is super easy to do. The APIs for these special modes like injection mode and monitor mode are there already. You can just use them, implement it in a couple of lines, and you should be good to go. In reality, the injection side is quite, let's say, quite a bit more complicated than anticipated, because we're basically leaving here the domain of standardized Wi-Fi and are, well, hacking, fiddling somewhere outside of the standardized domain, and you have no guarantees how the hardware will react in this non-standardized way. So one problem I
encountered
discovered was low injection rate. Many chipsets I tested really had terrible injection rates, like in some cases in the order of 1% of the air data rate. I could only get through that, so this was pretty bad. I solved this by just selecting good chipsets in a way. Then many of these drivers and firmwares I tested ignored quite crucial parameters I requested them to obey to. So for example, PX power. I found many adapters ignoring this setting and just sending at a low minimal power value, which is of course not what we want. But simple, dirty, and don't look at the actual lines, but it's just a couple of lines. Kernel driver patch fixed that for me. Even more importantly, some devices ignored data rate requests. So I requested to send a packet at, I don't know, 54 megabits per second, and these drivers were always sending the packet at 1 megabit per second, which is not enough for video, for example. Luckily, there is one specific Wi-Fi dongle that I showed in the pictures earlier that has open source firmware. So you can just download that firmware, compile it, flash it onto the Wi-Fi.
I wish he would name the... Did he show the name? That sounds really cool. Can I go back? He showed a picture, but I can't read it. Could you please mention it? I don't want to research it myself.
1 megabit per second, which is not enough for video, for example. Luckily, there is one specific Wi-Fi dongle that I showed in the pictures earlier that has open source firmware. So you can just download that firmware, compile it, flash it onto the Wi-Fi card, and actually, again, to have control over the data rate, it was just a one-line change in the firmware, and I could specify exactly the transmission parameters that I needed for my project. Now with all the troubles fixed.
Do I also make such like nasty noises when I drink? Like these speakers? Or is it better? I hope so, because sometimes these speakers, I mean, they are talking all the time, so they are kind of like out of breath, and they have a microphone at their mouth and stuff like that. But yeah, maybe I'm also making these sounds. Yikes.
To say, we again back at this basic scheme, and this works already quite well. So if you install this on your drone, there's no problem flying around a couple of 100 meters with such a setup without any special ingredients like amplifiers, big antennas, and so forth. But my initial motivation for this project was more to explore the world from a bird's eye perspective, so a couple of 100 meters didn't really cut it. So I wanted to increase the possible range by any means, and one of these means is to just add more of these cheap dongles on the receiver side. You can just put them in there, and this will then enable you to do software diversity. And at first glance, you might think, well, this looks not really helpful. We have 3 times receivers that receive the same data stream from the receiver, so we will have only 3 copies of the same data at hand. What should we do with that? In reality, this actually helps quite a bit, and the reason for that is that in reality you have multi-pass interference. So starting from this oversimplified transmission scheme, you will never encounter such a transmission here on Earth, maybe in space, but here on Earth you have other objects that cause reflections of the signal, and these reflections will interfere at the receiver side, either constructively or destructively, and it's simply pure chance whether you will get a constructive or a destructive interference. And by placing several receivers at different locations, you basically can twist a bit the shape of this triangle here, and this basically helps you to get a better chance that at least one of the receivers will not suffer from destructive interference. And actually, in reality, this really helps a lot.
Cool.
There are other use cases of this software diversity. For example, you could use that to realize antenna diversity. So typically, if you look at these black antennas here, these are omnidirectional antennas giving you 360 degrees coverage. And this is already a good starting point, but with antenna diversity you can add different antennas to different receivers. So for example, you could add to the 360 degrees antenna a very high gain, long range directional antenna. know, well, I'm just flying in that direction, long range, you can just combine the antennas depending on your needs. And if you really invest a bit more, you can just use lots of directional long-range antennas and realize, well, let's say an antenna that's really not feasible to do with just antenna magic electronic means, so to say. And third use case is, of course, you can increase spatial coverage. So there are situations like this top-down view scenario where you have occlusions which the transmitted signals cannot pass over. And in that case, you can simply place several receivers at different locations, and the software will automatically fuse the signals from these receivers so that you get, in the end, only one logical data stream out of that, which does all the handover stuff and everything automatically from one stick to another. Let me quickly explain to you how this works. It's quite simple. So we have here an example. It's 3 cards and 4 packets. These arise, of course, consecutively. And let's just imagine, card 0 received a package with a CRC error. So there's something wrong. We don't know exactly how much. At least one bit seems to be flipped, but could be not really severe, could be really severe, we don't know. But the other cards received good packets, so we just pick one of the 2 greens and we're fine and have a good packet here received. Packet 2 might be good on card 0, CRC error on card 1, for example, and it might be completely missing for card 2. So in that case, of course, easy choice, we pick the green one, which is fine, and we have a good packet in the end. Now packet 2 might have a CRC, completely missing, and again a CRC. So what would we do here? Well, it's a tough choice, but the best thing we could do is to pick one of the packets with a CRC error. Maybe preferably the packet with the higher received signal strength. But besides that, there's not much more we could do. And packet 3 might be missing on all of the cards. And this typically happens when you have some external interference, like someone switches on a light, creates a spark, and this destroys the reception on all of your receivers. And again, there's nothing we can do about that. Now, taking this combined stream of packets, this is of course not satisfactory. So this is still better than one card, but there are still some artifacts. And how could we deal with these? Well, simply by adding forward error correction to the data. And the way I implemented it is actually quite straightforward. So to these payload data packets, I simply add forward error correction packets. 2 or more. It's configurable depending on your needs and on your link quality. And of course, now for the first 2 packets, there's nothing to be done. They are good already. And now we are dealing with the broken packages, and we start with the worst case, which is the missing packet. We have no data at all here, so we can, or we should start with that one. And so we apply the first FEC packet to the missing packet, and you can think of these FEC packets as, well, joker cards, so to say. So you can recalculate one of the data packets by using this FEC packet. So
I don't get it.
Let's use that, and from that we could reprocess the original value of this packet. And of course we
How does it work?
Do the same thing with packet 2. And
what? Why?
now we have a good
Stop.
data stream again. Of course, this is now the optimal example. In reality, you sometimes have situations where you used up all FEC packets before you repaired all data packets. That can happen. If that happens too often, you should just dial up the number of FEC packages and you should be good again. Alright, so this was the basic principle, and now I'd just like to show you some usage examples of the tools that I developed that realizes this transfer mode. So first, a bit artificial example is simplified transfer. So we first start the receiver because we want to capture all packages from the transceiver and not start in the middle, and this simply works by starting this RX program. This is part of the Wi-Fi broadcast software, and you just specify the Wi-Fi adapter that it should use. And in case of software diversity, you would just list several adapters, and it would automatically do the software diversity under the hood. And what this does is basically all the data it receives, it will output on STD out, and you can pipe this into ImageMagic's display program. On the transmitter side,
what is this tool? RX.
full example is simplified transfer. So we first start the receiver because we want to capture all packages from the transceiver and not start in the middle, and this simply works by starting this RX program.
RX command not found. LibreOffice community STR Python RX English for Python. What is this? Is it like in NetTools or something that I don't have installed? Do I have like I don't know. But yeah, let me quickly research that. I'm kind of curious right now. RX command not found. Yes, that's how I research. No. If config utility. Do I have if config? If config? No. Okay, cool. So maybe it's in the same packet. That NetTools. Yeah, that's what I said. NetTools, but I'm not on Debian. So core NetTools. Oh, there's NetTools Debian in the AUR. Okay, let's go with core NetTools. So, RX. No, fuck. But now I have if config. Yes. So if anyone knows where to get this, like, this talk is super interesting, but it's also like, I would really like to, like actually use something from this talk, like his dongle or his RX command, but I really don't know where to get those things because he doesn't explain it. I hope somebody in the QA will ask, but I doubt it because I don't know, that's not the type of question that is usually asked. But to be fair, that's the first time I would have a question during a talk, which is interesting, right? I've watched so many talks and I've never felt the urge to ask the presenter something. But this time I have, and now I'm not there, which is sad. But let's see, maybe I can also later in the comments ask, or maybe you guys in the comments can answer my questions. So what Wi-Fi dongle does he use and where to get the RX command from?
It's part of the Wi-Fi broadcast software.
Oh, it's part of the the RX command or the display?
Start in the middle, and this simply works by starting this RX program. This is part of the Wi-Fi broadcast software.
I should listen more carefully. So it's part of the Wi-Fi broadcast software. What? Is it firmware or software?
This RX program. This is part of the Wi-Fi broadcast software.
Wi-Fi broadcast software. Which Wi-Fi broadcast software? Yeah, I don't know.
And you just specify the Wi-Fi adapter that it should use. And in case of software diversity, would just list several adapters, and it would automatically do the software diversity under the hood. And what this does is basically all the data it receives, it will output on STD out, and you can pipe this into ImageMagic's display program. On the transmitter side, it's the same in verse, so you just output something to STD out file, in this case a GIF file of your new drone, and you pipe that into the TX program of Wifibroadcast, and it's, as soon as you execute this command, it will be sent out into the air and picked up by the receiver and subsequently displayed by ImageMagic. So pretty simple, but like I said, artificial setup. This is now an actual example that I'm using, for example, on my drone, so to transmit the video. So as a PC, I'm using a Raspberry Pi, just sitting on the drone, and I start this command. So this looks a bit more complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. So the first part of this, from here to the pipe, is simply a standard Raspberry Pi tool that outputs H.264 compressed video data on STD out. And again, you pipe that into the TX program, and it will immediately be sent out into the air. There's no need to have any receiver enabled, it will just be emitted in the air. There's another alternative, so if you do not want to use a Raspberry Pi, you could simply use a GStreamer API call, which is pretty much the same thing. So you capture from a video for Linux device, compress it to H.264, and then output it to standard output and pipe that into the TX program. On the receiving end, you can do again the same in reverse. You use the RX program, pipe that into a GStreamer pipeline, and display that image onto your screen. And this is already a setup that is able to fly for you pretty well. Now, Wifibroadcast is actually agnostic to the data it transports. So it's just you pipe data in and it falls out on the other side of the channel, so to say. And this on its own is not very useful, and therefore I developed some components that kind of complete the drone application. And one thing is, for example, I created a Raspberry Pi image that you can simply burn onto two SD cards. You put these into your RX and TX Raspberry Pi and switch them on, and you have a video link running. So that's quite nice. And on the RX side, you have also support for recording. So if you just add a USB stick to the Raspberry Pi, you will automatically record the video of that transmission. I also developed OSD, that stands for on-screen display. It's an overlay onto the video that shows some telemetry information of the drone, like battery status and so forth. And I also ported everything to Android. This was a bit more complicated than anticipated. Just to give you some impressions, so this is what you could mount onto your drone, Raspberry Pi Zero, pretty small device, weighs only a couple of grams, and you get the camera already from Raspberry Pi Foundation with it, and yeah, that's a pretty good drone setup that works even on the tiny drones. On the RX side, so this is now my clumsy self-made setup. On the left you see my video goggles that I cut out of some foam piece. In the middle is the blue thing is the battery, and on the right the grey box is a Raspberry Pi, and the white thing is of course the Wi-Fi receiver. And this is quite a nice setup, so I have the components in the pockets of my jacket, goggles on my head, and this is enough to fly around. This is an example of the OSD display. here you see basically everything that might help you to safely get your drone back home, like
That looks so
receive
cool.
signal strength, battery status, artificial horizon, distance to your home, and so forth. And we will see other examples of this in a second. This is a self-captured screenshot of my Android port. So the Wifibroadcast camera looks onto the tablet, and the tablet shot the screenshot. And so you see this gives this nice recursive tunnels. Again, Wi-Fi dongle connected to the Android device, and this was quite a bit nastier than expected because I needed to recompile the Android kernel because it didn't support, of course, the Wi-Fi dongle. Then I needed to run Wifibroadcast in a change root environment, pipe that into Netcat, which sends UDP packets to a local port. And then on the Android side, I had an app that receives data from the local port, decodes the H.264 and displays it on the screen. So it's not exactly user-friendly, but it works. As conclusion of my talk, I would like to show you a recording of a long-range video transmission. Hasn't been done by me, but some other crazy dude, I would say. So what you see here is again the OSD display, and the video in the background is actually recorded on the ground. So this is the actual live footage that the drone pilot will see and use to control his drone. And so this is a fixed wing drone. You see here it accelerates to take off.
Is it flying?
And now we're in the air.
So cool.
And in a couple of seconds we should see the antenna of the drone, which is nothing special. It's just here this gray stick, which is standard omnidirectional antenna. And now if you take a look here at the bottom, this here is the distance to the operator. It's
60,000 meters.
And as you can see, it's crystal clear video. In this case, I think it's 720p.
Wow.
And this is really quite a nice visual input for you to control your drone. Yeah, all right. I think I will let this running during the Q&A session. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Quite impressive indeed. So thank you very much, Biffy. Questions please to the microphones. We have 1, 2 and 3. So come to the microphones. And we have a question on the internet too, but we start with microphone 2.
Hi. Thank you for your talk. You said that there would be graceful signal degradation, but can you also display the connection quality, for example, by how many FEC packets did I have to use?
I'm not doing that one, but there's something similar, like if you look here up, the first number is the number of data blocks that could not be recovered by fully by FEC packets. So I'm just wondering why this here isn't increasing, but so this gives you already quite a good indication, but I think your suggestion is also a good idea because it was the trigger earlier than this one. So that would be certainly helpful.
Thanks.
Maybe the question from the internet, please.
There's a practical question. What is the name of the Wi-Fi dongle you used?
He asked it! No way!
So I used this. Let me switch back to the picture here. So this white thing here is called TL-WN722N. If you buy this one, make sure to get the first revision, because the later revisions redesigned the whole interior thing of the chip, and of the dongle and use a different chip.
Microphone 1, please.
I'm totally blown away by the kind of range that you get there, because the implication is that with essentially constant hardware, if you go into the air, you could eavesdrop wise lands over 100 kilometers. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the setup is asymmetrical, so the standard antenna that you saw in the beginning of the video, that wouldn't have a 100 kilometer range. It's an omnidirectional antenna, and this one is observed on the ground with a high gain directional antenna. So it would only work if you would install this high gain directional antenna on the aircraft. But in that case, you're totally right. You could observe Wi-Fi lands from 100 kilometers probably. Yeah.
Right. Number 3, please.
I'd like to know which technology you use to filter the packets from the receiver side. So you might sniff everything once you are in monitor mode, and I'd like to know what you are using to filter them, only the one from the video.
That's BPF. So
Berkeley packet filter.
I'm using have a specially crafted MAC address, and I'm just applying a BPF onto that, and this will do the trick. And there's also support. So, for example, the telemetry is also sent, of course, with Wifibroadcast. And Wifibroadcast has a concept of ports to have several streams in parallel. And there again, a BPF filter is used to separate these streams.
All right, number 2, please.
Okay, hello. So one of the biggest implications in FPV flying, like the biggest deals for like extreme or quick flying, is the delay you get on the video. So how does your digital video, really clear and sharp vision, compared to the analog FPV we had for many years? So what's the difference? Because I assume it's bigger.
It is indeed. So I have an example here. This is what you get from analog FPV quality-wise. Latency-wise, this is, I think, roughly 40 milliseconds. Wifibroadcast is with the Raspberry Pi in the 100 millisecond range, so it's quite a bit slower than analog. But actually, Wifibroadcast is not the cause of that. It's more the video compression. So Raspberry Pi uses, let's say, frame-based triggering. Like you receive an image from the camera, and only once it's completely there, subsequent steps will be triggered. And ideally, you would kind of more pipeline the processing. Like you start already when the first pixels arrive to process them. Unfortunately, with Raspberry Pi, this is not possible. Because the video compression is closed source, which is a bummer. And to this date, I have not yet found a better alternative that gives lower latency. I looked around quite a bit, and the only thing that would give better latency would be custom hardware, like in the sense of where you have full control, like an FPGA thing. But I decided not to use this because Wifibroadcast should be approachable. Like you should just go buy an online shop of your choice, cheap components, assemble everything, and you're good to go. And FPGAs are a bit too special for that domain.
Okay, thank you. And another question you've shown on the slide, the Raspberry Zero W. So you said it's only the Raspberry and the camera, but I assume you're not using the built-in Broadcom Wi-Fi chip. You're using the TP-Link, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, next question, number 2.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the great talk. I also recognized the USB Wi-Fi dongle. I have one myself. And I was thinking, is the Atheros chip the first hardware revisions to manufacture it, or are there just rest to be purchased?
Actually, I haven't bought them for a while, so I don't know if they are still, you can still get them.
Because if you go to a shop now, you don't get this device anymore.
Oh, okay. There there are some other alternatives. So, for example, in the 5 gigahertz range, you can also use other chips. There's a link on my blog. It's linked to this talk if you're interested in that. And actually, it's worth mentioning, if you intend to use this for drone applications, there are, I think, 3 or 4 forks of Wi-Fi broadcast already that just extended the scope of functionality by, I don't know, orders of magnitude. So you should also check out definitely these forks. They are pretty well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next one.
Yes, thank you for your talk. It was impressive to get a clear video signal for 10 kilometers. But one question is, how do you control the drone? It's another direction of your communication would interest me.
So you can use Wi-Fi broadcast for that as well. So you can run both the RX and TX instance of Wi-Fi broadcast on the same dongle in parallel. That works. But I personally am a big fan of having the highest possible reliability on the control channel. So for that I use frequency hopping transmitters like you can buy for RC from RC vendors, and these are really almost indestructible. Well, they interfere a bit with the transmission sometimes, but there are ways around this. But yeah, highest reliability for control, and then a bit below that for video feedback. That's just my personal gut feeling.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And our last question.
Hi, regarding the error correction, you've shown that if you use one of the error correction packets, you can use it to restore a broken one or even a missing one. Now, taking you have 2 broken ones, did you check it would be feasible to use these both and apply statistics to check if you can reconstruct it?
So you mean I have 2 broken, meaning bad CRC packets?
Yeah.
And 2 FAC packets?
Yeah, and basically if you can use the ones with the broken CRC and don't use the forward error correction ones.
Okay, no, I didn't do that. No. So, sorry, I have no info to that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, another last question.
Okay, so here's the last one. With traditional analog video, you have the possibility of choosing the channel that you want to transmit on, so multiple people could fly at the same time. You mentioned before that in Wi-Fi broadcast there's this notion of ports to separate different streams. How many ports could you currently support? Like how many drones in the air that can independently stream are supported? And is there the possibility of having more or less ports if you limit bandwidth?
So indeed, if you limit bandwidth, you can transmit more in parallel. I wouldn't recommend to use ports to fly drones in parallel, because one of the drones might not play nicely and use up more bandwidth, and then you have a problem. So I would rather recommend to use Wi-Fi channels to separate these. And actually the white Wi-Fi dongle I've shown is quite capable. You can even detune it to transmit in 2.3 gigahertz. You shouldn't do that, but you can do it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Befi, and a warm applause for you again.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. So that's it for this talk. It was really interesting. Fun to watch. Can really recommend to check out the original, but I doubt anyone watched until here anyways. Whatever. Go and check out Lasergurkenland, please, so that I didn't pay for